If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard in Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Welcome everybody to the PWZ Podcast. This is Rick, and we've got a little bit something different going on here today. A best of sorts, if you will. I started this podcast back in November 2019, and all I knew was that I wanted to start a podcast. One of my dreams was to do a radio show, and I have a vast record collection. And then one day, I started in 2018. I started getting back involved and interested in professional wrestling after about a 2-3 year absence, and so why don't I just start a professional wrestling podcast? And started doing things like recording about a good 10, 15, 20-minute episodes in my basement for a little while at a time. And it came time, I think in January, I decided that, hey, I wanted to interview somebody, bring somebody in as a guest, and one of the things that intrigued me most was a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Pomblon, who is writing a book on Herb Abrams and his UWF promotion. So I reached out to him, and within a week we had my very first interview done with him. I think that was maybe episode 12. It wasn't a very good interview, as I was not very good at doing interviews. I like to think that I changed over time. I've gotten better. One of my very first guests since doing more interviews was and doing more episodes was Mr. Duke the Dumpster Droese, former WWF superstar.
Well, I was finishing up college and in 93, and I was about to graduate, and then during college I was working at a private beach club on an island where the members were people that owned homes on this island, kind of people with money, basically. Anyway, I remember I had given my notice, and my plan was to drive around the country and go to the last remaining territories and try to get a job with my promotional packages. Well, I was reading the paper this day at work, and it talked about a TV executive convention at the Miami Beach Convention Center, the NATP convention, and it talked about how Hulk Hogan was there, and he had just signed with WCW, and they were asking him questions about the steroid scandal in the Miami Herald. And the last sentence of the article said, Vince McMahon, who was also in attendance, had no comment. And I realized Vince McMahon was in my town at that moment. And literally the next morning at 10 a.m., I walked through the door. And what I did was, one of the members of this beach club was a TV executive, and he gave me his credentials. And I wore a suit, and I wore his credentials, and I walked in there like I was an executive, and I walked right up to Vince McMahon. Didn't give myself time to think about it or get scared or talk myself out of it. I just did it. I walked up to him. I introduced myself. I said I wanted to work for him. I told him I had been working on the independent scene down there for several years, and he asked me a few questions, and then I got the hell out of there. And when I got out of there, that's when it hit me. So, but yeah, I didn't give myself time to even get scared or think about it. I just did it.
Right. What was it like to encounter him? I mean, it was like, he's I guess he's a pretty big figure in the business. He's been the top promoter for almost 30 years, probably longer than that, right?
Yeah, so. And at that point, it was basically understood that nobody walked up to Vince McMahon. You didn't just walk up and start talking to Vince McMahon. And I just kind of threw that out the window. I said, you know what? This is the only chance I got. I don't have a brother or a friend who works there. I don't have anybody that's going to bring me in. It would This is my only shot. That's the way I looked at
Right.
it. And I got a really good piece of advice from a local wrestler in Miami that night before while I was planning this thing. I told him what I was going to do, and he said, if you see Vince McMahon alone, you better jump on him because he won't be alone for long. And I literally walked in there, and when I walked up to the WWF booth, there was this big group of people milling around, all the office people, you know, the Pat Pattersons,
Right.
the Kevin Dunns. They were all in a big group, and Vince McMahon was over here drinking his coffee by himself. And I made a beeline right for him, and I just said, how are you, Mr. McMahon? It's nice to meet you. My name's Mike Droese. And I gave him the whole pitch, and he was very nice. He was very gracious. I mean, I'm a pretty big dude, though, so yeah, I am sure he could see something. He was like, okay,
Right.
this guy might have something. And I just spoke to him, you know, like I was applying for a job, and that was it. And yeah, I handed him the promotional package, and J.J. Dillon called me about a week later to bring me up for a tryout.
Well, one of the things of rediscovering professional wrestling after about a 2-3 year absence was rediscovering independent wrestling, which was always a thing that I always preferred to watch over WWF and WCW. Northeast Wrestling was one of the favorite promotions that I watched locally and that I attended to. Their home arena is about 10 minutes from my home here, and I would go to their shows. And every year they have a show at the North Haven Fair. And just last year, or the year prior, I should say, 2019, I attended a show at this fair, and I saw a gentleman by the name of Christian Casanova take on JT Dunn. Now, I started working with Danny Bryant, Dan the Beast, and he and I started reaching out to people and bringing guests on the show. Dan reached out to JT, and, you know, within a week, we did an interview with him, and he had a lot of really great stories to tell.
So I definitely wasn't a wrestling fan growing up. I played football. Football was everything for me. I had the boyhood dream of going to college, being the best football player in the world, going top 10 in the draft, like just having that big moment on stage, like shake hands with Goodell, whatever you got to do. That was my dream. And then when I was 17, I started training to do the pro wrestling stuff. And that was just like on accident. Me and my buddies had our little shindig of a show, and we put a video on YouTube. And I actually a guy, Vinny Marcellia, who wrestles with the Ring of Honor. Like,
Yep.
He lives in my area, and he happened to see the YouTube video with the guy he trained with. And they were like, well, you're not the worst, but we got a ring. You can come like learn how to be a real wrestler. And that's kind of how it started for me. But then at like 17, I ended up breaking my face, like early training. And I had to make a decision after that if I wanted to continue with college and go play football, or for some reason I was just drawn to this pro wrestling thing. I think it's because like I played football for so long. I knew football. I knew the X's. I knew the O's. I knew what I wanted to do. But wrestling was the first thing in my life where it was like, I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything. I'm not a fan. I know The Rock. I know Stone Cold. Like, that's what I know, but like, I don't know anything. But luckily, like, my younger sister was a wrestling fan, and that was where like my early knowledge came from. Like, watching SmackDown with her, and was a UPN 28 was the station here. Like, that was my wrestling knowledge. Like, now it's so extensive. It seems so silly that was my early introduction to it. But aside from that, I have, like, early memories watching, like, 1, 2, 3 Kid with my uncle. I remember videos of Macho Man, and that's why they were so predominant as my favorites, because it's my earliest memories, my earliest attachments to people. But for, like, the wrestling that has consumed me now, finding the Hero and Punk matches, that's what did me in, because it was just like I had only known like silly catchphrases and the best there is, the best there was. And for me, I talked so much trash. I'm such an ego-driven, competitive athlete. Like, I need spice. I need variety. I need something that makes me feel like, oh, wow, this could be me, or this could be somebody I know. And the WWE, when I was younger, WWF, those guys were just rock stars. I couldn't compare to them. Who the hell am I? I'm 10 years old. I don't smell what the Rock is cooking. Like, what? But then I saw Hero and Punk, and like, especially at that time when I found them around 17, 18, 19 years old, I was very rebellious in my real life. I was like, so much had happened to me. I was just so spiteful and angry that when I heard Punk get on the microphone and say all these cuss words to people, I was like, wow. I want to say those things to people. That's how I feel inside. I'm so mad at the world. And then I saw Chris wrestle, and I'm like, yo, this guy is so smooth. His wrestling is precise. And even when I was doing like messing around wrestling with my friends, I was never in for falling on the ground or the concrete or anything silly like that. I wanted to learn the style. Like, oh my God, this guy did the headlock the same way 14 different times in this video. Why is he doing it like that? Like, those are the questions I ask myself as my friends have cheese graters on their forehead and they're just screaming, Cactus Jack, Cactus Jack. And I'm like, oh, cool, man. But so drop toe hold, how's that go?
So you're going for more like a technical style, like classic wrestler.
I just love, I'm a perfectionist. I wish I wasn't sometimes. I'm so detail oriented, and I'm so driven by detail. I need to know every scenario of everything, and I think that's what I enjoy the most about my matches. Is I put so much effort into making sure that nobody else is going to go this extra length, and I know that the real wrestling fans appreciate the detail. I learned it from those guys watching it all those years ago. There was a reason why they were so famous in a time where being famous wasn't really a thing in wrestling. Right. You're collecting tapes. How many times is that tape really going to get traded? Well, survey says a bazillion, because look at those guys now. And those matches still hold up.
One of the things that really sparked my interest in professional wrestling was a chance meeting by former WWF superstar, WCW, and Four Horsemen member Paul Roma in a gas station. He runs a school and a promotion called Paradise Alley Professional Wrestling, and he invited me to check it out. A couple weeks later, I went. Their shows are generally Friday nights. They're in their home school, and they're $5. And I had a fantastic time. I ran into people I had not seen in a long time, and I just started a lot of friendships with people on that particular night. One, Mr. Don Kincaid, and one, the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy. And I just really liked the product a lot. It was a lot of fun. And I've always promoted on my Twitter and social media, and one of the things that some of the guys took notice. And I had 3-time Paradise Alley Tag Team Champions, the House of Payne, on several times, and of course they're going to come on again. And the first time, they put me in an awkward situation by asking me a really awkward question. Check this out.
Be honest. Don't let no trickery here happens, because Nick likes to Nick Payne likes to do trickery. Now, if we were split up, right? Nick Payne and I. If we were split up, who's the Shawn Michaels on the team, and who's the Marty Jannetty of the team?
I'm going to tell you that I thought Marty was a better wrestler at times. And those two wrestling each other when they broke up was phenomenal. So I just want to see the match. I can't answer that question, brother. I can't answer that.
It's funny. We asked Roma the same question earlier, and he just looked at us like, "Yeah, no, you're not getting that one out of me."
One of the other guests that was very intriguing to me was Greg Oliver. He's the head of Slam Wrestling out of Canada. He had just written a new book, a non-wrestling book. He writes a lot of wrestling and hockey books. And somebody that just joined the ever-rotating cast for the show, Andy, the Big Cat, a.k.a. the Greenport Destroyer, reached out to him and said, hey, you want to come on? So we talked his new book. We talked a little bit of the history of Slam Wrestling and professional wrestling in general. He was very gracious to give us about 30 minutes of his time. And then one of the things that he brought up and was talking about was a new book that he's working on, which I'm really looking forward to. It's his book with John Aries, Northeast wrestling legend, that went on to promote a lot of conventions and autograph signings and stuff over the years. And he had the Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show back in the 80s and 90s. It's very awesome to listen to. It's really great to listen to nowadays as a podcast where him and Brian Last go back and review it. Greg was very gracious with his time, and this was just a really cool and fun interview.
I'm actually looking forward to this book. John, of course, put on like the first major well-known convention on the East Coast, or at least in the Northeast. I'm not even sure what year it was, maybe the late 80s, early 90s. And at LaGuardia Airport, I think.
Yep, 91.
Okay.
And he did 4 different conventions, and each one, well, the first 3 certainly got progressively bigger, and the 4th one was a little bit more scaled down in some ways. He also helped Herb Abrams do the one that he ran as well, that ended up, he had to go fix things up with the LaGuardia Airport there because Herb Abrams stiffed them on the bill. I know you find that hard to believe.
Yeah, right.
But I really took Aries' project partly because, as I talked about with Billy Van, I mean, I love, writing about wrestling. I love writing about hockey, but you need to change them up sometimes. So it was really neat to learn a lot more about baseball, and the country music especially fascinating me. But I mean, it's more than just that with Aries. I mean, sure, he discovered Patty Loveless and Kelsey Ballerini and had a huge input into the career of Sarah Darling. But I mean, he had a chance to get New Kids on the Block, but it didn't happen. Like, there's some really neat side stories. And John's just been immersed in that business for 25 years. So it was a great book. I'm looking forward to everybody's feedback on that one when it comes out. It'll be out in the spring. I think we have an official date. I think it's April 6th or something like that. But you know how it goes. They're out earlier than that.
Right.
Now a lot of the modern fans who weren't around in '91, you really have to understand, Rick, as you can attest, pre-pandemic, there was such a big culture of conventions and meet and greets.
Yeah. Yep.
John was one of the first guys doing that kind of stuff. So he really cultivated that culture. She kind of planted the seed for that culture, I should say.
But a lot of that came out of his baseball, right? He'd been to baseball conventions. He was a big baseball fan. He still raves about Eddie Kranepool being his favorite Met ever. So all those things sort of paid off in the sense that he ran these conventions, but he certainly didn't make a lot of money on them. The things have changed a lot. I mean, he was charging, a couple of bucks an autograph back then. And, Sting at the first one didn't charge at all. And Bruno refused to ever sign for money. So, again, things have changed. But, I mean, we could have done a whole big book just about his wrestling stuff. But his whole life, his ups and his downs, makes it a better read, I think, than just sticking with the wrestling stuff, which is why he's got the podcast, right? The podcast tells you all the little minutia and the stories that go on. And Brian Last does a great job prompting him a little bit and poking him and getting John to tell some good stories.
Now, when I started the show, I was basically doing every episode. And then I met Dan, and then I met JJ. And Dan and I did a show together. We started doing for a little while, we were doing an Impact Wrestling review show every week for a while. And don't worry, that'll be coming back. And JJ would come in on Sunday nights. We'd do a pay-per-view review, or we would start doing retro reviews on the nights that there wasn't pay-per-views. And then the three of us started doing shows together. And then one of these shows, randomly, Dan says, "Hey, I got this guy that I invited to come on." I said, "Okay, no problem." It turned out to be the DVD Freak. And DVD Freak has turned out to be a valuable contributor to the show. Basically, they've been doing it every Sunday night. I'm not always available to do shows, so I said, "Hey, you guys want to record without me? Dan, it's your show too. DVD Freak, it's your show too. JJ, it's your show too. If I got to step out, there's been plenty of times when somebody couldn't step in." And so DVD Freak and Dan would do shows. So recently, Dan has been on an interview kick. We've been reaching out to a lot of people and trying to bring people the best content that we possibly can. Dan reached out to former WWE talent, current Impact talent, Heath Slater, a.k.a. Heath Miller, or Heath, whatever you want to call him. And DVD Freak had to ask a very interesting question.
So, on that topic, earlier in the year, there was a lot of rumor and innuendo that Nexus was actually supposed to make an appearance at WrestleMania 36. So my question is to you is there any truth to that? And, if there is, was there any future implications for the group? Or was it just like a one-off sighting?
I can 100% tell you what I heard. Or let me rephrase that, what I was told. I was told that Nexus would be there, and it would be all 8 of us, not 7, because everyone, I feel this way too, but then again, I don't because of the stipulations of how it happened. Everyone says, oh, Daniel Bryan wasn't really in Nexus. He was just in it for that one night. But him being as vicious as he was amazing, because the only restrictions we ever got from Vince McMahon himself was don't hit a fan and do not touch the cameras. That was it. Do whatever the hell else you want. Yeah, I don't care. They can live. Do whatever else you want. That was our direction going into Miami, destroying the ring and everything. Daniel didn't do nothing wrong. He got released because of the whole choking incident with Justin Roberts. So it's get the hell out of here with that crap. That's bull crap. But yes, there was, talk. Yes, what I heard was that we're supposed to be at NXT TakeOver, sitting front row at the main event, to where everyone's like, whoa, what is this? What's going on? Type deal. And that's all I heard. You'll be sitting front row at NXT TakeOver for the main event. And that was we walk down through the crowd, we take our seats, the main event's about to start, the main event guys are looking at us, the people are looking at us, whoa, what's going on? Which could have been damn great, amazing. But COVID hit, two guys was in disagreement with everything. I'm going to just let y'all guess who those were. And then it was one of those things to where it just didn't happen. Mainly COVID. Because the two guys that disagreed, we could have easily got Henning in there and another member of Nexus. It wouldn't have been the same as the original, but it still would have got an effect. But yes, there was rumors of all of us. But I'm sitting there thinking, bullshit. We are not just going to sit front row. That ain't going to happen. We're going to destroy something. That's a fact. And I thought it would be main event. Whoever won, 1, 2, 3, ding, ding, ding. Yay! Here we go. Y'all guys are screwed. Blah, 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 blah. But it didn't happen.
One of my favorite things to do is go out there and support the local wrestling. Go out there and support independent wrestling. Go out there. You should go out there, too, and support independent wrestling. You never know. Go out there, buy a t-shirt, buy a DVD, buy a ticket. It's an amazing thing. It's more personable. And speaking of more personable, you can, I've gone to enough shows as of late where I can go in, people say hi to me, some of the talent walk in, say, hey, Rick, what's up? And I got to meet a lot of people and talk to a lot of people. A lot of people will come on this show just because they know me from seeing me at shows, and that's a really awesome feeling. An interview that I did a while back with a gentleman named Danny Adam, I have to say, we sat there and talked about a lot of stuff, his professional wrestling career. We didn't talk a lot about modern wrestling. Talked about his wrestling career, talked about watching wrestling growing up, and we talked about metal in all its glorious forms. It was just a really cool interview, and it was a lot of fun.
Honestly, I'm keeping busy. I mean, it sucks because there's not a lot of live wrestling going on, but there's still a lot people can be doing. I recently made it a point to let people know that ever since March, I have been doing nothing but keeping busy. I have been ordering new gear. I have been shooting promos for companies. This this is the time to show a company what you have to offer besides your in-ring work. And there's so many people that are just doing nothing. And I'm like, you hold a title for this company. Why aren't you doing something? Promote your company. But here in Massachusetts, gyms reopened in like May, so I was back at the gym, and then I started going to Kevin Landry's Pro Wrestling Combine, started training there, and that's just trying to stay busy, man.
As I stated before, Dan has become basically the king of the interview for PWZ Podcast. He's reached out to so many people as of late between, over the time with PWZ, back when he started out, reaching out to JT Dunn, Heath Slater. He interviewed James Ellsworth. Well, one of my favorite things that he did, he interviewed former TNA and America's Most Wanted member Chris Harris, and also he was former WWE talent Braden Walker. And this interview that Dan did, it was really, really good, and I was always been a huge Chris Harris fan. And man, it's sad because you don't get to see him as much on TV, because I always thought that he was a really great talent, and that he was going to be a very big, very big future major star for the professional wrestling industry.
But no, I think the top guys, either they had heard or they asked because they were top guys. Maybe they saw the writing on the wall. We didn't. We were being brought in every week, being used, and we took advantage of the matches, got great experience, and then of course, we were shown on Nitro, Thunder, doing the security, and that was okay at the time. Of course, guys like me, I can't speak for the other guys. I mean, guys like me, I looked at it as a step where I was hopefully going to be used at some point. But we'll never know. That was the year 2000. We were used that year, and then by the beginning of 2001, I think they had sensed they were trying to cut costs wherever. That's where we were stopped being brought in, and I think that was probably had to be the very beginning. So I'd say January, February, and then I think the company was done in April. So to answer your question, though, no, I didn't really know. Once they stopped bringing us in, you kind of hear rumblings throughout the locker room of something's going on. Didn't really know what. But yeah, I was at home like everybody else watching when the whole sale went through, and you see Vince McMahon on TV.
Another guest I thought that was really great that we had was when Andy and I interviewed Rhett Titus from Ring of Honor. Rhett had a really cool career, and he had trained under Daniel Bryan, a.k.a. Bryan Danielson, and Austin Aries. He had a funny story to tell. I read that, while doing research, that he hated training under Bryan Danielson. And, so of course I had to ask him. And in the interview, he said that it helped him shape himself better. It was very interesting, and it's almost, it's a very comical story as, why he hated working with Danielson. And I found it interesting that you said you hated training with Bryan, but then, it helped, but later on, it helped you become a more dedicated wrestler. What at that time period made you hate? Was it just his, like an old school style training regimen that he had?
I wasn't in nowhere near the shape I am now, so I remember distinctively every training I would always be late to because I'd be coming from work. So I'd always be late, and I would always have to do extra squats, extra push-ups, all that stuff. And I was like, oh man, this sucks. And I was actually going to make it to practice on time one day. I was like, oh yeah, making on time, no extra squats, and because that would ruin your whole day, But then all of a sudden I hit traffic. I'm like, no. So I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I'm like, all right, this is what I'll do. I'll get dressed in the car now so I can hop right out and go right into the training. So I get in all my gear, my knee pads, my boots, everything, and pull up to the school at we used to train at 4 o'clock. So I was 358, 359, and I'm like, like running up the steps in there and like rolled right into the ring. And Brian's like, wow, you made it on time today. I'm like, yeah, He's like, all right. So we start training, and then all of a sudden, like, Brian just looks like enraged. You're like, oh gosh, like, and he's like, who the hell brought mud into my ring? And I was just like, oh no. And like everybody slowly started looking down at the bottom of their shoes, and like no mud anywhere else. And then I looked down at the bottom of mine, and I was like, oh man. And he's like, ow. So I had to do extra exercises anyways. So, but yeah. That was like training with Brian. But, that's stuff you grow to appreciate later in life, just like little lessons like that, and always having to be punctual and on time and stuff like that. So, yeah. But training with Aries was a little bit different because, he was like, hey, I'm not your personal trainer. We're not going to come here and do squats until you puke or anything like that. But I'm your wrestling trainer, so that's what, you guys are paying me for. So it was pretty cool that, obviously I was doing my workouts on my own and all, but it was pretty cool that he, just focused more on the wrestling. Brian, we'd have to do a whole lot of squats. I remember one day he was like, you got to remember, I was probably like 19 or so training with Brian. So he's like, all right, everybody picks an exercise for the day. And he asked me, like, which exercise do you want to do today? And I was like, jumping jacks. And he's like, oh, jumping jacks, huh? And then he made us do 10 minutes of jumping jacks in the wrestling ring. And like, there's like 4 of us in the ring. And like, when you jump in, it's like bouncing, but you all got to be in rhythm though. Like, oh man, what about everybody was cursing me up and down for that one.
Another great interview that we had. This one was one of my favorites. Going into this interview, I thought it was going to be a very difficult to interview, but for some reason, it was the greatest interview, I think, or one of the greatest interviews that we had with Shane Taylor, the leader of Shane Taylor Promotions. He had a lot to say, whether it be social issues, his professional wrestling career, his kids, his wife, or anything in general. It was a really cool interview.
See, Rick, this is what I love about Shane Taylor. If you're friends with him on Facebook, like, Shane puts his opinion out there. He doesn't hold back. And let's face it, as a black man in America, that's not always a safe thing to do.
Right.
But,
Well, there seems to be a trouble with people that seem to make it successfully, whether they're a musician, athlete, or whatever, about speaking their mind. And it's always just, you have a platform and you're just, people will pay attention to you more because you've reached a certain amount of fame. You know what I mean? It's just, a lot of normal people seem to look down, I wouldn't say normal, but people, look down on that, and I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. Am I making sense? Sorry.
Yeah, true.
I know I rambled, I'm sorry.
No, this is the thing, right? Like, there's a very fine line, right? Because wrestling is one of those things where people want to escape when they watch sports, right? And I get that. And there's a level of entertainment value you have to bring. The caveat to that is, once those lights go off, I'm still a black man in this sport. I'm still a black man in this country. I don't get to take a break.
Right.
We don't get to take a break, right? We don't get an escape from this. This is what our reality is. So the best thing I can do is try to show these examples, teach these lessons in an entertaining way. But at the end of the day, I still understand who I represent. I understand what eyes are on me. I understand who is looking at me. I understand the obligation that I have, and it is to progress and move the bar forward, open these doors for other people to walk through, because that is what's necessary. We've had generations that have had success and seemingly forgot about everybody else behind them. Right? So then you kind of get into this restart, and it's always harder when you have to restart instead of continuing to push, right? So yes, I've been successful. Yes, other people have been successful, but we're still not where we want to be. And for me, I can't even claim to be and to achieve the success that I really want until I win the top prize in Ring of Honor, and that's the Ring of Honor World Championship. So, and even then, the fight's not over. You know what I mean? It's just these are the steps that we're trying to achieve, and when and if I'm able to do that, that can show generations of kids, of wrestlers, of my peers after me that, hey, you can do this. You don't have to be a stereotype. You don't have to be put in a box. You don't have to be some caricature of black culture. You can do this the way you want to do it your way, and still be successful and reach the very top of the mountain if you're willing to put the work in, no matter what anybody says.
I would like to take this time to thank every single person that has made this podcast possible. From my friends, Danny, DVD Freak, JJ, Andy, the rotating cast, from Matt McCourt, Don Kincaid, friend Eric, Jonathan Peck, the Guardian of Chaos, everybody, and all the countless guests that have come on, Shane Taylor, Barry Horowitz, JT Dunn, Duke the Dumpster Droese, Heath Slater, everybody. I'd just like to thank every single person that made this podcast possible. And I, of course, cannot forget Scott Rogers of Huge Pop Podcast. I cannot forget Mr. Trivia and the Nugster of Top Rope Report. You guys have always been very supportive of my show. Keep it up. Thank you so much, and keep up your shows. Thank you. 2021, hopefully, will be an even bigger year and a lot more fun. We can do a hell of a lot more as far as guests and such, and just covering and talking about the world of professional wrestling. All you people, guests and friends alike, have all helped me realize a dream, and I appreciate all of you and love you all. And please keep looking forward for more content. Don't forget to like us on Twitter, twitter.com/PWZ Podcast, facebook.com/PWZ Podcast. Send me an old friend request. Let's talk some wrestling. There's a lot more coming your way. Thank you so much. Keep up. Listen.